Hello family, thank you for tuning into this video today. What I'm going to do is take a bit of a dive into how to find some of the best high yielding suburbs in regional Queensland right now. And I'm going to give you a few examples of some suburbs that you should be targeting if you're looking to find properties that have a good combination of capital growth, but also a really strong rental yield. So if you're an investor, stick around. I think you're going to get some tremendous value out of what's going to be covered in this video. Let's dive in. Hey guys. So look guys, my name is Troy Simbasini. I am the owner and head of research of Life Buyers Agency, and we have a bunch of subsidiary brands that services the regional Queensland property market. We've got Tropical Life based in Cairns and Townsville, servicing the North Queensland area. We've got Capricorn Life servicing the Central Queensland area, which includes Bundaberg, Rockhampton and Mackay. And then we have Sunshine Life that services the Southeast Queensland corridor. So I'm the owner and head of research of that. And if you are a home buyer or investor that may need some help navigating some of these markets, feel free to reach out to me and the team. I'll leave a link in the show notes for you today. So look guys, when it comes to the best high yielding properties or suburbs across regional Queensland, one thing that I've learned is that there are plenty of high yielding suburbs in regional Queensland. In fact, what you'll find is that most suburbs with a median house price under $450,000 will return you a rental yield generally around that 6% or above anyway. So that's easily possible, right? You can just go and pick any old suburb with a median house price under $450,000 and you'll do just fine from a high yield point of view. However, what those cheaper suburbs tend to be is the lower socioeconomic areas in a lot of these regional Queensland hubs, and they don't necessarily have the best track record and they don't necessarily have the best demographics to sustain ongoing rental growth. So these suburbs, they're generally good if you're only someone that's chasing cash flow only, and I would say they're not that great if you're someone that's looking for a combination of capital growth and cash flow. And look, that's the trick, right? That's the challenge, and that's what I want to walk you guys through today is where can you find these suburbs where there is a good combination of capital growth and high yield. So when you marry those two together, you get really good results when you're investing in regional Queensland. So look guys, just from my experience, so I've purchased more than $200 million worth of residential real estate across regional Queensland. And one thing that I've learned is that the best high yielding properties comes from those properties that are located where a good suburb and an okay suburb intersect with each other. Because what you actually find there is that there might be a $550,000 property renting for $600 a week in a good suburb, but right next door where that invisible line separates the two suburbs, it might even be on the same street or the neighboring street, there might be a $470,000 property renting for $600 a week. So that 550 house returns a rental yield of what, 5.6%, and then you have the $470,000 house returning a rental yield of 6.6. Yet they're in the same location or pocket of the town itself, but they're just in different suburbs. So what you actually find is you end up paying the premium to get into the better suburbs, so it comes at the higher price point. However, you can get cheaper rents if you buy in the less superior suburb and end up with a much more stronger rental return. And this is what I've learned in regional Queensland, where you can get some really good opportunities and really capitalize on the location upside that comes from where the good and the okay suburbs intersect with each other. So one example would be a suburb in Bundaberg called Kepno. So Kepno is a suburb that intersects with a suburb called Ashfield and Kalki. And these suburbs are the best part of $100,000 to $150,000 more expensive to get into. So what that actually means is that on the other side of an invisible line in the suburb, a property would cost anywhere between $100,000 to $150,000 more than if it was in Kepno as opposed to Ashfield or Kalki. So what that means is that despite there being a large variation in price, there is not a large variation in the rental returns, particularly if they're the same type of property. Like one property could be 1 or 2 streets away in Kalki, that's a 3x1, and that might sell at $550, and then you might have another property that's a 3x1 that might sell for $470 in Kepno, only a few streets away. But what you'll actually find is that their rental variation isn't much different compared to their purchase price variation, because their rental price variation might be around sort of $590 a week, and one might be $560 a week. So there's only a small rental variation. So that's where you can get the best properties, I think, that lend themselves to really good capital growth, because you get that location piece right, because you're neighboring those more expensive and premium areas. But at the same time, you get that really good strong rental yield because you're piggybacking off of the location where it intersects with these other suburbs. And by and large, you don't have to pay for that additional premium to get into that suburb, because you are buying in the less superior suburb. So you might get the property $60,000, $70,000 to $100,000 cheaper, but they're renting for the same. So if you can target suburbs where the good suburb intersects with the okay suburb, you're going to do really well. So Kepno is one good example, and there'll be a couple of streets around where it intersects with Ashfield and where it intersects Kalki. If you can find a property within some of those pockets, I think that's where you're going to get the best properties that give you a combination of capital growth and higher yields. Now, the second suburb, I think, returns some fantastic rental yields, but at the same time gives you really good capital growth upside, is a suburb called Bersa in Rockhampton. So if we moved over to Rockhampton now, so Bersa is a suburb that intersects with a suburb called Frenchville, and Frenchville is one of the more upmarket areas in Rockhampton that has a higher price point, a higher clustering of demographic in the upper middle class, whereas Bersa is more notoriously known for it being a lower socioeconomic area, more of a blue collar area. However, where Bersa intersects with Frenchville, there are a number of really good streets around there that if you can buy a rental property in that pocket or on some of these streets, you're going to get a tremendous yield. Because again, similar to Kepno, where Bersa intersects with Frenchville, to buy the same house in Frenchville as opposed to a couple of minutes down the road in Bersa, you're looking at an $80,000 to $100,000 price difference. But when you compare the rental variation, there's only $10 to $20 rental variation. So that means that you can get a really good high yielding property in that neighboring suburb of Bersa as opposed to buying in Frenchville and paying that additional premium to get into that suburb. So that's another good location I think you should consider if you are someone looking for a combination of capital growth and really good rental returns, is a suburb called Bersa, and where you want to target is where it intersects with Frenchville. You can probably buy homes there in and around that pocket right now for high 400s to low 500s, and in some cases you might be able to get something with a 3 in front of it. However, that might lend itself to a strategy where you might need to add value, renovate it, fix it up, redevelop it, etc. But by and large, you can still get into that particular pocket of Bersa, I'd say, for around 450 to 530. But one thing you have to be considerate of, Rockhampton is a very hot market, and the velocity of opportunities that pop up in these pockets are also very scarce. But again, if you're willing to wait around and wait for these opportunities to arise, then I believe you're going to get the best results long term as well. So that's one to put on your list also, guys. Now moving up to Mackay, and the suburb we're looking at in Mackay is North Mackay. And if you are familiar with the Mackay area, North Mackay sits adjacent to the CBD. It's basically on the other side of the Pioneer River, and you're into the city in only 5 to 10 minutes, if that. And look, guys, North Mackay neighbours Mount Pleasant and Andergrove, and respectively both of those suburbs are $100,000 to $80,000 more expensive in terms of median house price to North Mackay right now, which sits at around $420. Mount Pleasant sits at around $580, and Andergrove and Beaconsfield sits at around that sort of $530. So North Mackay, I think, has some really good opportunities as well, particularly buying those properties where it intersects with Mount Pleasant and where it intersects with Andergrove, because you're moving into those better pockets where there is a higher clustering of upper middle class demographic, and at the same time you can buy a property in there for the best part of $100,000 to $80,000, even $50,000 cheaper than what you could in Mount Pleasant or Andergrove. So what that means is that you're going to not pay the premium to get into Mount Pleasant and Andergrove. You get into North Mackay, you don't need to pay that premium, but you get very similar rents, and you can probably get rents around that $550 to $600 a week. Very similar to Mount Pleasant and Andergrove, but you're paying a lot less with the purchase price of your property. So North Mackay, look that one up as well, guys. All right, moving up to Townsville in North Queensland, and the suburb I think you should check out is a suburb called Heatley. I've been very bullish on this suburb, and I bought a number of investment properties there this year. Now, for around that sort of low 300s up to low 400s. And the reason why I think it has a good combination of capital growth and cash flow right now is because where it's positioned, it intersects two very good suburbs in Mount Louisa and Kerwin, where their median house price is like $100,000 to $150,000 more respectively right now. And what you'll actually find is that the properties that we bought in Heatley for around that 350, 420 mark, if you pick those properties up and put them over in Kerwin and Mount Louisa, you're probably paying $450, close to $500,000. And guess what? When we actually look at the rental comparables of the property in Heatley versus the property in Kerwin, they're virtually the same. So you can buy property a lot cheaper in Heatley, but the rents are pretty strong, even though you're paying $100,000 to $150,000 cheaper for the same property. And this is where you can get some really good cash flow or high yields by basically piggybacking off of these more premium areas and where they intersect with those suburbs, and you target those type of dwellings. There is where you're going to get some really good results. So where Heatley intersects with Kerwin and where Heatley intersects with Mount Louisa, if you can look at targeting properties there, you're going to get some really strong rental returns, but at the same time get properties a lot cheaper than the median house price in Mount Louisa and in Kerwin. So you get that higher yield, but at the same time you're in the location where you can still get a lot of that capital growth upside potential because you're so close to what the good suburbs have to offer.